When one YouTuber called out another's new snack product, it sparked a meltdown the internet couldn't stop talking about. It all started with a snack. Well, not just any snack, but one that was meant to be the next big thing in the food industry. KSI, Logan Paul, and Mr. Beast launched their joint project, Lunch Laco, claiming it was a healthier option for kids. This trio, already known for their viral content, thought they could make a splash in the food market, but it didn't take long for things to go wrong. Turns out, the snack wasn't as healthy as they promised. In fact, it was discovered to contain moldy cheese. Yeah, moldy cheese, not exactly what you'd want to see on the label of a snack aimed at children. But what really turned this into drama wasn't just the bad product, it was the backlash that followed.
I'm going!
Enter Dan TDM, the Minecraft YouTuber whose fan base has grown up with him over the years. He wasn't about to let this pass without saying something. Dan took to Twitter, calling out the product for what it was, a cash grab. It wasn't long before KSI noticed, and instead of letting it slide, KSI fired back. What began as a mild critique of a snack product quickly escalated into a full-blown Twitter war. But here's the kicker, Dan didn't respond. Instead of stooping to KSI's level, he stayed quiet, letting the internet do the talking. But KSI didn't let this go that easily. He wasn't about to back down, even if it made him look more ridiculous with each passing day. As the weeks went on, KSI couldn't let it go. Instead of acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, he had gone overboard, he doubled down. The internet, which had rallied behind Dan, quickly turned into a space where KSI's every word was being scrutinized.
What happened to YouTubers, man? I can't not say anything anymore. Do better! Do better!
KSI, desperate to defend his brand and protect his pride, launched into a series of tweets. Each post seemed more desperate than the last, more like a tantrum than a defense. But here's the thing, Dan wasn't even biting. It was as if KSI was fighting a ghost. Every time he posted something, Dan just didn't react. This silence, this complete refusal to engage only made KSI's rants look even more unhinged. Dan had the internet's support, and he didn't need to do anything but continue being himself. He didn't stoop to KSI's level, didn't engage in petty Twitter feuds. He kept doing what he does best, making content and living his life. But KSI, the guy who made his career out of chaos and drama, couldn't handle it. He kept throwing shots, and it wasn't even a fair fight anymore.
Highest new entry in Billboard Hot 100 week after release. That is mental. Oh my god. And you know what I replied on Twitter? Dan TDM could never. Facts! That boy could never do that. Could never. Am I lying? That boy will never be able to touch any of those accolades.
The internet had clearly picked a side. But instead of retreating or taking a breather, KSI did the opposite. He saw this as a marketing opportunity. Why not take the backlash and turn it into something that would help his music career? So that's exactly what he did. Enter his new song, Thick of It. He began promoting it like crazy, using the drama with Dan as the backdrop, and shocker, it worked. His song made its way onto the Billboard charts. But even then, all anyone could remember was the fact that this whole drama started over a snack product that no one really wanted in the first place. But while KSI was spinning this into promotion, Dan was out there doing something far more meaningful, and it would only add salt to the wound. After weeks of tweets and rants, KSI finally felt like he was winning. His new song was climbing the charts, and he tried to spin the narrative that he had successfully shut down Dan TDM, despite the fact that his response had made him look like the one obsessed. While KSI was busy promoting his track, Dan remained calm, unbothered, and silent. He wasn't wasting his time battling on Twitter. Instead, he was focused on what mattered, his content and his community, and that in itself was a victory. But KSI couldn't accept that. He needed to believe that his chaos had a purpose, that he was in control. So he kept digging himself into a hole, publicly venting his frustration and trashing Dan in any way he could.
Oh no.
So much.
I just do it because I know it pisses people off. Bro, I look on Twitter and I go, oh wow, these people actually care that I'm just saying all these things about that.
You said you want to start a real life chant about that.
Yeah, because it's
you are not the rattler.
I like to continue it because it's just funny.
So you think?
But then I feel like it's reaching its point where it's not even funny for me anymore.
It wasn't funny.
It's not funny.
Nah, bro, it was great. I'm using it as promo for my song. I'm also just
You're not rattling Dan, you're rattling his YouTube
fans. That's
yeah.
it. No, it's not Dan. It's
But Dan,
fan.
He wanted to paint the picture that he was a man defending his business and his honor, but to the rest of the internet, it was clear that the only thing KSI was defending was his ego, and it didn't look good. Meanwhile, Dan wasn't even breaking a sweat, he just kept on with his day-to-day life. No drama, no outbursts. When Dan finally did break his silence, it wasn't on Twitter or in some heated video response.
The whole internet like had my back, which was kind of wild.
Oh yeah, it was really cool. Was it? Were you just sat in your room like, this is a bit mad?
Yeah, it was a bit ridiculous for like.
It was
for, like, 2
awesome.
weeks.
And then the living the dream. Living the dream was crazy. Mate, he's been crying for like 2 weeks straight, and you come in and just like, I have a great life. That was incredible.
That was my way of like.
You went for him now and all.
You did like 2 days
KSI.
ago.
Yeah, but he didn't reply. He didn't reply.
He's learned, hasn't he?
We'll be living the dream soon.
I really like the idea that like he didn't know that. I'm gonna sound like such a. He didn't know that you had more aura than him.
I don't think
doesn't-
I did either, but
Yeah, you definitely do, mate. Oh, that's sick, man. It was so
It was-
awesome watching, seeing all the that meme of like, no one speaks ill of this man, and it was
Yeah.
like you with that.
there was a few of like, you know, the Gru meme where it's like he's got the gun held up to the thing.
Which
So it's
one?
like, you don't speak ill of Dan TDM, and then it was
Oh yeah,
Gru
yeah.
with the gun. I pointed at him. It was so
Yeah,
funny.
it was just like, it was
Because like
just-
my family aren't big YouTube watchers. They don't
Yeah.
know the whole like scene at all. They were sending me memes. I was like, oh god, this has gone
my
like,
like
way
dad
too
knew
far.
about real big.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was how like he just. What I just enjoyed is like he couldn't get around his head why. I don't think he's never not been the top dog before. The way I described it is like if you're in school and like me and Jack are year 8s and he's like a year 10, and then for the first time ever the really kind year 11 goes no, and he's like
Yeah.
never had that happen before.
I think
it was
it's
just
more as well. Like I
love
couldn't be
school
bothered to
hierarchy.
like fight. Like he loves the whole back and forth. That's what the whole boxing stuff's
what he
about.
wants,
Like I
isn't
get
it?
it. I understand it. But it was funnier to not feed into it because
Just
you
exhausting.
just watch it happen. It was.
Instead, he casually mentioned the whole ordeal during a podcast. The calmness of his response only made KSI's over-the-top reactions look even more ridiculous. Dan wasn't seeking the spotlight or trying to start more drama. He just didn't care enough to engage with KSI's nonsense. He had already won the internet's respect simply by being himself.
My wife was always like, just think before you tweet. That was one time I didn't really think too much before tweeting. Usually I'll type it out and be like, no, I can't bother, delete it.
Yeah.
So I didn't tell her for like 3 days, and she's not on Twitter really. So I didn't tell, and then I kept getting notifications from my phone. I was like, oh, Logan Paul's responded. Jimmy's messaged you. KSI's responded. I was
It's
like,
to be
well, I'm
like-
gonna have to mention something now.
What was that? Like, what was it like? Hey babe, so
Yeah. She was like, oh, well, I agree with you, but maybe you should just not kind of
Yeah.
like stoke the fire anymore. I was like, okay, that's fair.
yeah.
Yeah,
It was just
and
one of
I
them
think
moments where I was like, oh no, it's actually getting out of hand.
It did get a bit out of hand, didn't it? And
Yeah.
yet you did nothing. Like,
I know, yeah.
yeah, it was so sick. It
So
was,
mental.
it was the highest aura I've seen anyone. And just like drop that, leave it, and then
Maxed aura.
it was. It
You
is
did max out
Dan,
the start.
I can't emphasize enough. It is at a max right now.
Okay, I'll take
It
it.
is. It. Oh, wow.
The more KSI threw punches, the more he lost. His desperation only made him look petty, while Dan's quiet confidence proved to be the most effective response. But KSI was still hell-bent on proving something, and what came next would take things to a whole new level. The drama wasn't over yet. KSI had one more card to play, or so he thought. At the Misfits boxing event, instead of focusing on his fight or the event itself, KSI grabbed the microphone in front of a live crowd and launched into another tirade against Dan TDM. He claimed that Dan's criticism of his product, Lunch Lee, was a personal attack on him and his company. It was as if KSI had completely forgotten what the actual issue was in the first place. But what happened next was far from what KSI expected. The audience didn't cheer him on. They didn't applaud or rally behind him. Instead, they started booing. And it wasn't just a light boo here and there. It was a chorus of boos. Soul-crushing, confidence-shattering boos. The crowd wasn't interested in his drama. They came to see the fight, not to hear KSI rant about a Minecraft YouTuber and his snack product. This was an embarrassing moment for KSI, especially given the situation he had put himself in. Instead of taking the opportunity to address the ongoing concerns surrounding Lunch Lee, like, you know, the whole moldy cheese fiasco, KSI chose to double down on the feud. He continued to make Dan the center of his attention, but no matter how loud he shouted or how much he tried to provoke the audience, it was clear that they weren't buying it. They were done. Even KSI's own fans, the ones who had stood by him through thick and thin, seemed fed up with his constant need to escalate things with Dan. Meanwhile, Dan was nowhere near the drama. He was out there doing his own thing, being a positive influence in the gaming community and staying far away from the chaos KSI had created. He knew that feeding into the negativity wasn't going to get him anywhere, so he stayed silent, allowing KSI to implode on his own. But while KSI was busy losing control, another controversy was brewing that would make things even worse for him. KSI was already on shaky ground, and his attempt to shift the narrative only made things worse. His snack product, Lunch Lei, had been roasted online for weeks after it was revealed that the cheese inside contained mold, not the fancy kind either. This was the sort of mold that made you question if you needed a tetanus shot just for looking at it. Despite the outrage, KSI remained obsessed with his Twitter feud and personal vendetta against Dan TDM. Rather than addressing the serious concerns about Lunch Lei, he continued attacking Dan online. His priorities were all wrong. The health risks surrounding his product were ignored, all while KSI focused on a harmless tweet from Dan. The internet wasn't having it. It wasn't just fans calling him out. It was the media, influencers, even former supporters. But KSI didn't seem to care. As the backlash around Lunch Lei grew louder, with calls for boycotts and answers, he doubled down on drama. He kept hyping up his music and boxing match, thinking it would keep him relevant, but the more he tried to justify his actions, the more his credibility slipped. The public couldn't ignore the irony. KSI claimed to care about his company, but he wouldn't even address a serious issue like moldy cheese in his product. It was like watching a reality star spiral while everything around them went up in flames. And just when it seemed like KSI couldn't sink any lower, the biggest blow to his reputation was still to come, and it came from an unexpected source. Just when it seemed like things couldn't get worse for KSI, he found a way to dig himself even deeper. The Misfits boxing event was supposed to be his chance to redeem himself. Instead, he gave a performance no one would soon forget, and not in a good way. KSI grabbed the mic in front of the crowd and once again went off about his Twitter beef with Dan TDM. The topic? A snack product.
Dan TDM, he came at my company, I defended myself, and I'm seen as the bad guy. How is this fair? When you come at my company, you come at me. When you disrespect my company, you disrespect me. So screw Dan TDM and screw Give.
In front of hundreds of people, he decided to air his grievances over an old argument. The audience, uninterested in the drama, responded with nothing but brutal boos. You'd think KSI would realize by now that people weren't on his side, but no, he tried rallying the crowd like they were on his team. Spoiler, they weren't. His rant didn't make sense either. KSI talked about how Dan disrespected his company but didn't address the moldy cheese or any real issues with Lunch Lei. Instead, he whined about unfair treatment without taking accountability. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash. You knew it was going to get ugly. The crowd's response was unforgiving. Their boos grew louder, drowning out his attempts to rally them. The more KSI tried, the more it felt like the universe was telling him to drop the drama, but he didn't get the hint. Instead of owning up to his mistakes, he doubled down on his ego, expecting the crowd to eventually come around. Spoiler, they didn't. But that wasn't the worst of KSI's problems. A certain product was about to add fuel to the fire. If the KSI versus Dan TDM drama wasn't already enough, things got even worse when we revisited the product that started it all. Lunch Lei. This snack, launched by KSI, Logan Paul, and Mr. Beast, was meant to be a healthier lunch option for kids. Sounds good, right? Well, not when it turned out that the snack contained actual mold. Yes, mold. And KSI and his team tried everything to hide it. Instead of dealing with the product's flaws and health risks, KSI chose to focus on his Twitter feud with Dan TDM. Why address the scandal when he could continue attacking a YouTuber for calling out his questionable cash grab? Dan, on the other hand, just sat back and let the chaos unfold. But KSI wasn't going to let it go. His obsession with the drama only made things worse, and the internet quickly caught on. The issue wasn't just the moldy cheese, it was KSI's failure to take responsibility. While the internet questioned the product's safety, KSI kept ranting about a Minecraft YouTuber's tweet instead of addressing the real issue. It was a textbook case of mismanagement. As the scandal dragged on, the backlash grew louder. It wasn't just about the mold anymore. People were calling out KSI for his inability to handle criticism. Meanwhile, Dan quietly avoided the drama, looking like the grown-up in the room. But this wasn't the end of KSI's PR nightmare. A certain energy drink scandal was about to make things even worse. Just when KSI thought he might escape the heat from the Lunch Lee scandal, another PR disaster hit him square in the face. Prime, the energy drink he co-created with Logan Paul, was supposed to be the next big thing, a drink that would change the game in the beverage industry. Instead, Prime quickly became its own scandal. Between lawsuits alleging harmful chemicals and a series of congressional investigations over its caffeine content, things weren't looking too hot for the drink or for KSI's reputation. You'd think someone would have stepped in and warned KSI about all the red flags surrounding Prime, but nope. He kept doubling down on the brand, all while his fan base began to question whether it was really as safe as KSI claimed. With controversy swirling, Prime went from a beverage of choice to a bottle of bad decisions, and KSI seemed more interested in defending his business than addressing the mounting concerns. Meanwhile, Logan Paul, who had his own shady past to contend with, was also part of this disaster. You can't forget about the crypto scam fiasco, where Logan tried to sue YouTuber CoffeeZilla for exposing his alleged crypto scam. As much as they tried to play off these controversies, both KSI and Logan seemed to find themselves in one PR nightmare after another, and now Prime was adding fuel to the fire. But while KSI kept pushing Prime, Dan TDM remained blissfully unaffected by these issues. As the Prime scandal continued to unfold, Dan stayed out of the limelight, letting the drama consume KSI. It's almost as if Dan was building a reputation of doing the right thing, while KSI was buried in scandal after scandal. And let's not forget the contrast between the two. One guy's fighting for his reputation in a product that's raising red flags, and the other is donating $320,000 worth of gaming equipment to children's hospitals. I mean, which one of these sounds more like a winner? As KSI's drama continued to spiral, it was clear that Dan wasn't the only one KSI had underestimated. A boxing event was about to take the tension to a whole new level. By now, KSI was drowning in controversy, but like a moth to a flame, he found himself in the spotlight again, this time at the Misfits boxing event. This should have been his chance to redeem himself, to show the world he wasn't just a man-child throwing tantrums. Instead, it became another cringe-worthy moment. After his Twitter rants and Prime drama, KSI grabbed the mic in front of a live audience and launched into yet another tirade about Dan TDM. It wasn't just a casual mention. KSI couldn't seem to let Dan go, dragging him into every conversation. He went on about how Dan disrespected his company and how he had to defend himself. Playing the victim, KSI asked how it was fair that he was the one being criticized. His desperation was clear, and at that moment it was obvious. KSI wasn't ready to move on, no matter how many people told him to. Here's the kicker. The crowd wasn't on his side. They didn't cheer him on. Instead, they booed him. Loud, soul-crushing boos that made KSI rethink his entire approach. This wasn't a normal crowd response. It was a sign that people were done with his antics. And the worst part, it wasn't even about Dan anymore. It was about KSI's reputation spiraling further. From the moldy cheese and lunch lead to his relentless feud with a Minecraft YouTuber, KSI's behavior was digging his hole deeper. But even as KSI's humiliation reached new heights, one final punch was waiting to land, and this one left him with no way to defend himself. As the dust settled from KSI's relentless attacks and public outbursts, the contrast between him and Dan TDM couldn't have been more stark. KSI was shouting into the void, trying to stir up drama and make a name for himself at the expense of someone who wasn't even fighting back. Meanwhile, Dan had managed to maintain his dignity throughout it all, and in the process, he emerged as the real winner. While KSI was busy hyping himself up over Billboard entries and Twitter rants, Dan was being celebrated for what mattered, his genuine connection with his audience. He wasn't interested in petty online feuds. Instead, he kept doing what he's always done, being a positive force in the gaming and YouTube community. His quiet approach to handling criticism, letting the internet do the work for him, paid off in ways that KSI could never have imagined. DanTDM wasn't just a YouTuber to his fans, he was a part of their childhood, a symbol of nostalgia and trust. And as KSI's antics continued to backfire, it became increasingly clear that Dan was untouchable in this battle. KSI may have thought he was stirring the pot, but all he did was reinforce what everyone already knew. Dan was the better person, both online and offline. The irony was impossible to ignore. KSI had tried to tarnish Dan's reputation, yet all he did was remind the world why we love DanTDM. As KSI's legacy became more synonymous with moldy cheese, Twitter tantrums, and terrible product launches, Dan's remained rooted in positivity and respect. And let's be real, KSI's meltdown wasn't just a personal loss, it was a public spectacle. As for Dan, he didn't even need to respond. His silence was the ultimate power move, leaving KSI's foolishness to collapse. If you thought this story was wild, you won't want to miss what happens in this next video.
Hey guys, a lot's happened these past few days, and I've had a lot of time to reflect and really understand everything that's happened and all of my actions. And you know, first of all, I want to, sorry. I want to apologize. I want to say sorry. I can't do it. Hey yo, drink Prime and eat lunch with me, motherfucker. Stay mad, DanTDM fans. Womp womp.